So, for years, my brother and I have been the Lord of the Rings fans of the family, and occasionally we would get our dad to join in on rewatching the films for the thousandth time. When they also came out with the Hobbit trilogy years later, we also kind of gave them a chance and enjoyed them for what they were. Not really putting them on the level of its predecessor, but kind of at the halfway mark. Not horrible, but far from being great. Just a dash above mid, really. Because they were basically the prequels focused on the adventures of Bilbo Baggins, who, by the time of the beginning of the Lord of the Rings films, was an old man who had found a ring that turned out to be possessed by evil. But he ends up leaving it behind to continue his adventures after so many years. So The Hobbit was kind of like our opportunity to see what Bilbo was up to in his younger years. But where the confusion started settling in was when folks started taking it upon themselves to create new stories, apparently inspired by the Lord of the Rings universe created by J.R.R. Tolkien, starting with the Rings of Power in 2022. I didn't really have much of any type of an expectation for it, so I kind of went into it just to see what it was about, and after the first season, I was like, okay, get me the hell out of here. It was pretty clear that they spent more money on the project than time to actually come up with something that didn't just look like some fan fiction that they slapped together. And I'm totally fine with fan fiction and people taking a few liberties here and there, but just as long as for the most part you can still see some resemblance of the source material. And this just didn't have that. Now, sometime last month, there was an announcement made about the late night show host Stephen Colbert co-writing a new Lord of the Rings film along with his son, the screenwriter Peter McGee, stating that this would be his next move after his show ends in May of this year. Now, Stephen is well known to be a Tolkien superfan, and it seems like his aim is to actually adapt an early section of the first Lord of the Rings novel, The Fellowship of the Ring, which is definitely one of my personal favorites. They would be adapting chapters 3 to 8, in which Frodo and his fellow hobbits begin their epic quests. Stephen decided he wanted to give the Lord of the Rings film trilogy director Peter Jackson a call for them to work together on this project.
The next Tolkien movie after Hunt for Gollum, and the fact that we've partnered up with you to develop the script. So,
yeah, I'm pretty happy about it. Should I tell people what the story is?
As much as you want, yep.
In a conversation with Mr. Jackson, Stephen says, quote, "You know what the books mean to me and what your films mean to me. But the thing I found myself reading over and over again were the 6 chapters early on in the Fellowship that y'all never developed in the first movie back in the day."
It's basically, the chapter is 3 is company through Fog on the Barrow Downs. And I thought, oh wait, maybe that could be its own story that could fit into the larger story.
Now, allegedly, the working title is The Lord of the Rings: Shadows of the Past. The film's official synopsis goes on to say, 14 years after the passing of Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin set out to retrace the first steps of their adventure. Meanwhile, Sam's daughter, Eleanor, has discovered a long-buried secret and is determined to uncover why the War of the Ring was very nearly lost before it began. So Stephen, along with his son Peter and one of the writers of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit films, are now going to be working together on this. So from the sound of it all, it seems like there's a chance that this could be pretty interesting. But obviously, because of Stephen Colbert's name attached to it, there could also be a good chance that even if it's good, that people might not want to see it because there are a good deal of folks out there that don't really care for him like that. We already know that these money-hungry studios these days are busy pumping money into whatever and whoever they feel like they could make their investment back from, plus more. And they also have no problem also putting a chokehold on anything that they feel might not make them as much money as they were projecting. So if this is something decent, or dare I say even good in the making, I'm hoping that the production companies and the execs don't butt in and ruin it. At the same time though, I also think that being a fan himself isn't really going to be enough when it comes to Stephen. Because fans and superfans of The Lord of the Rings and Tolkien are kind of a dime a dozen.
In what might be one of the worst, most perplexing decisions of all time, late-night TV show host Stephen Colbert will be writing the new Lord of the Rings movie with his son and Peter Jackson. What? Why? What? How did this happen? People are like, oh, no, he's a diehard superfan. It's the Lord of the Rings. It's Tolkien. Like, there's a billion diehard fans. I could go on Reddit right now and find you someone who knows more about Lord of the Rings than Tolkien himself. Does that mean we're going to let him write the next movie?
You could be a superfan or a walking Tolkien encyclopedia, as some people have called him, and you can still be a part of an uninspired project. or something that's just been hijacked by the Hollywood politics of the times.
Woke up this morning to discover that we're getting a new Lord of the Rings, which would excite me, to be honest. Well, I found out that it's being co-written by Stephen Colbert. Why? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't even be surprised that Hollywood is never satisfied until our favorite franchises are totally ruined. We saw it with Star Wars. Put a chick in it and make her gay. We're tragically about to see it with C.S. Lewis and the Greta Gerwig adaptation of Narnia, in which purportedly Meryl Streep is set to portray Aslan, as in the allegory of Jesus. Don't get me wrong, homegirl can bust a tune. No one sings ABBA like Meryl Streep, but Aslan, really?
Stephen Colbert co-writing a nepotism, nostalgia-tinged Lord of the Rings sequel might be my least favorite movie news this side of the Warner Brothers merger, and the ultimate irony is that J.R.R. Tolkien tried to write a Lord of the Rings sequel, and he made it 13 pages in before saying, nope, don't need it. The idea from Colbert just sounds like the epitome of everything that I'm so frustrated with in Hollywood franchises and blockbusters, that we are always looking backwards. You shouldn't say you want to make a sequel and then reverse engineer it to fit into the canon or have it fit into both the books and the films. Stories should be told because there's a need to tell them. There's a grander purpose. Lord of the Rings exists as a thematic and human story outside of the world that it takes place in. That's why, even though I know people will say, oh, but Colbert is one of the greatest Tolkien scholars in the world and he cares so much about the world or whatever, I honestly couldn't care less. I obviously hope that people adapting certain works care a lot about the material, but being a fan only gets you so far. He's obsessed with the world and the lore, but I think that is completely irrelevant to the art of telling a good story.
Now, obviously, this has the internet a little torn at the moment, with some people outraged with the whole idea of Stephen being involved in this at all, but others are saying that people are just outraged just to be outraged. However, many of the latter groups seem to be mostly Colbert fans, so they believe he can do no wrong and aren't really looking at things objectively. But I gotta be honest, this can really go either way. I think we should just let everything play out and see, and let the cards fall where they may. But try to do so without bringing up too much of Stephen's late night TV past, since that's been the underlying reason for a lot of the hate that he's been getting over the last few years. Which makes sense since he's been doing it for so long. So ultimately, it's looking like it's going to take some time for them to actually start production on this and get things off the ground, so we're probably not even going to see the film for some years. It definitely wouldn't be in their best interest to rush this, but it would also suck if they took their time and it was still trash. So we'll just have to wait and see, but what are your thoughts on all this? Let me know down in the comments.